Porter in the bookshop today. Sounds so proper when I say it like that, doesn't it? Max Porter in the bookshop. Okay, Lanny is so funny and original and profound, but please can you do my job for me and describe what it's about? What's it about, Max?
Well, if you want to write about sad things, you have to make it funny. I think is like sums up my whole career.
Because otherwise, the
life
readers...
is very funny and life is very sad. And
Yeah.
those two things aren't separate. And I think you get to the truth of things if you remember how funny it was when you were at your saddest, etc.
Yeah.
So it's about a little boy in a village, and he's friends with an old man called Pete, who is an artist, and they have this incredible relationship where Pete is teaching Lanny art, and it's like free from any grading and testing, and they are just friends, and it's gorgeous. It's kind of the love story for me is between this pedagogical platonic relationship between an old man and a boy, and his parents who are sort of new to this village, the dad who commutes into London and feels very awkward, and the mum who's a writer.
I like that you do that, the dad who commutes.
Well,
it's a very
he's just
physical
trapped
expression
in his
of who
body.
he
Yeah,
is.
and he's trapped, and then Lanny's so free and loose and gorgeous and at one with the world, and he is a sort of reprimand to the dad who feels like a kind of capitalist
Drone.
worker bee, a drone, yeah. And then there's a character called Dead Papa Toothwort who opens the book and listens to the book, and he's the mythological heart of this place, and he floats underneath the village every night listening to them putting themselves to bed, and he'd be in here now.
Under the table.
Actually, he would love it in here, yeah.
Floating
He'd love
around.
it, yeah.
And did it come to you as a fully formed idea, as a vision, like Samuel Taylor Coleridge in a dream, or was it a gradual emergence?
I do have dreams about books now. I do have
Do you?
dreams now. Yeah, I'm someone that keeps a bit of paper by the bed and writes them down now. I think you've got to be in
But then do you wake up in the morning and go, why did I write
yeah,
drains?
hog drain.
Yeah.
It's a hog drain. And then you realise it says huge drain.
Brilliant idea for the novel. Should definitely be a title. Huge drains. Everyone will buy that.
Part one of my drain trilogy.
Can't wait.
No, it was a poem years ago when I was not a writer and didn't think of myself as a writer. I wrote this poem about Pete and Lanny and it had a very different ending, and it didn't have Dead Papa Toothwort, and I put it in a drawer, never thought about it. And then when it came to thinking about would I write another novel after my first novel, I thought, no, I didn't want to write another novel. I certainly didn't want to write one for the sake of it, which is a thing I still don't think is the right thing to do.
Which is what your publisher or agent would have liked you to do.
Well, yeah, but just because you have a readership doesn't necessarily mean you should publish to it.
Right.
But then I was like, yes, I want to write a novel. I suddenly, desperately want to write a novel, and I want to write an English novel about all the things that make me feel sick and entice me about this landscape and this place now. But obviously, I don't want to write a Brexit novel. That would just be a terrible
Horrifying.
thing to do. Yeah. But then weirdly, I sort of have written the kind of somehow slightly cathartic or post-Brexit or something.
I was going to say, is the most irritating thing somebody could say about Lanny, it's a Brexit novel?
No, it's fine.
It's fine.
But that would be like saying, Jane Austen's books are Napoleonic War novels.
Right.
They sort of are and they aren't, in as much as
Yeah.
they're not about it, therefore they become quite interesting about it.
Yes, or of it. So the idea of a writer, do you have an image in your head of what a writer looks like?
No.
So to me, it's somebody sitting there like this. Just that. That's the image in my head.
Yeah.
What's the image in your head of what a writer is?
Yeah, it's that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like someone worrying, someone doing this,
Yeah.
and then this.
Yeah.
Quite small, and yeah.
Yeah.
But I should say no. I should give you the correct answer, which is that I see the writer as plugged into the oral tradition, standing in in the middle of the woods while someone's banging a drum,
Right.
speaking the story out,
Yeah.
and the story changes every time, and it's to do with our heartbeats, and it's to do with these templates that we change, and that we all have so much in common, and we borrow each other's stories and redo each other's stories, and but that's not true, is it? No, it's a paranoid and unpleasant person hunched over a Mac.
A paranoid and unpleasant person hunched over a Mac.
Honestly, for me, it was. I was always writing because I wanted to paint, or I wanted to make music, or I wanted to. I needed to make stuff. I come from quite a makey family, and then I was like, I'm not good enough painter. I need to make music, and I'm not good enough musician. I need to write, and so I had this sort of tension.
Yeah.
And I always kept notebooks and sketchbooks, and I've got still my kind of my raw material whenever I write anything is these hundreds of notebooks I've got for stuff, ideas, and half-formed things, and you couldn't even really. It's quite kind of anti-product in a way because you can't really label it. It's not poetry, it's not prose, it's not essay. It's just me.
Yeah.
It's just years
creating.
of me.
Yeah.
And I can borrow from it and pick it apart. So that for me is writing.
Okay.
Is that thing where you're not thinking about the product at the end. and you're not thinking about a readership, or you're not trying to perform or deliver anything to anyone's expectations. You are just doing the thinking.
Structurally, it's not like a conventional novel. Would you call it experimental?
Oh, Fran, all novels are experiments.
Well-
No, yes, I would slightly, yeah. Because I'm really impatient with prose and long. I'm really impatient with the beginning and middle and end.
But the trouble is, experimental has these connotations where it makes it sound difficult, which this
Yeah.
isn't.
I really hope it's
At all.
not. And if you're put off by certain, like the typographical stuff, or think it's a gimmick, or you just need to sit with it for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It will welcome
And
you
it's
in.
gripping, and then you can't put it down. And
I just don't like the way that avant-garde literature takes itself very seriously
Yeah.
and is exclusionary. It's very often experimental novels are very pleased with themselves,
Yeah.
and it's a kind of way of performing one's cleverness, and I think that's really
alienating.
well, it's counterproductive.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
not, it's, you know, it's so well done. Would you want a round of applause for
Yeah.
how clever you are?
Yeah.
And so actually, the aim of this is to welcome people in, and then then take them unexpected places. Like the whole point of part 3, we can't really talk about it without spoilers, but the point of part 3 is that it's an utterly preposterous thing to happen, especially in a modern social realist novel.
Right.
And yet I hope by the time you've got there, I've taught you to read the book in such a way that you're like, yeah, of course.
That
we're
you
going
buy
this.
into
We're
it.
going this, yeah. But you don't. It doesn't even occur to you. There is no Max Porter going, ta-da! Look at my clever shift of viewpoint.
Look at my plot
Yeah.
twist.
We're going magic realist, reader. There's none of that. We
Yeah.
go there, and,
Yeah.
you're with me because, as I said, you're complicit in this. These
Yeah.
are your thoughts are as much a part of this. Your judgment of these people, your intuition, your possibly even. You've even got a kind of counterpoint going on between what I've been telling you and what you've been thinking yourself, which means that when you get to this final point, you're possibly even a bit sickened
Yes.
by your own involvement with it.
Yes.
And therefore, it's a completely different book to a mum than it is to a dad. It's a completely different book to someone who lives in a village than it is to someone that lives in an urban. You know, so it's all the time. There's a huge amount of ambiguity and open space, which I hope is collaborative.
So where did this all come from? Let's talk about your relationship with books. So can you remember learning to read?
Yes.
Can you? Tell me
Yeah.
every detail.
Well, I learnt to read with the Roger Red Hat, Jennifer Yellow Hat books. Do you have them?
Yes.
I found one the other day in a charity shop and I was in bits. It was the Roger Red Hat and the Giant. Or maybe it was Percy Greenwood. One of them anyway, there's a giant on the hill.
Yeah.
Even the illustrations, you know, when you're straight back.
Straight back into it, age
And I remember them
5 or...
saying, I loved it. I'm do it with Chimamanda book. I remember them saying, try it without your finger. So that must have been
Try it without your
really
finger.
early on.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, I'm there, I'm doing it. And then it kind of mulches together with later things. Where I remember this amazing day when they said, right, you're free from these learn to read books.
Right.
Go to the shelf.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, like grabbing, the Count of Monte Cristo. Like, okay, buddy, calm it down. Just up to the top shelf. So I remember them saying there, and I've talked about it a lot with Lanny. I remember being told I didn't have to hear the book in my head. I remember the teacher or the reading assistant saying, you can read faster now, and you'll be able to read faster if you don't hear it in your head.
Okay.
And me thinking, oh, that's a shame, because I do
I like
the
hearing it in
voices.
my head and doing the voices.
Hello, Lanny. And then also that there'd be no pictures, and I remember that being a bit of a disappointment, not because I needed the pictures. I remember, you don't need it illustrated for you anymore. It's like, yeah, but I like it.
Yes, yeah.
And then realising later on the kind of tyranny of illustration and the fact that,
Because it's telling you how to picture the characters.
But also I love graphic novels and I read a lot of comics, and I think that's why, because image and text is my thing. I'm interested in it. And actually, if anything, I want my books to be very image rich.
Yes.
And I hope that there are kind of set pieces that are more like my current fixation is illuminated manuscripts and what exists between the image and the text behind it, and also in the margins and the kind of marginalia and the kind of wit and the sophistication that exists in those early illuminated manuscripts.
Also, I love that idea of the relationship between illuminated manuscripts and graphic novels.
Oh, yeah. Well,
what are some of your favourite graphic novels?
This is what I'm going to do.
Is this going to be the next novel?
The thing is, this is a preposterous thing to reveal. Exclusive in the bookshop.
Right.
I want to write a graphic novel with no images. I want to try and do for the literary novel what the comic does.
Okay, so that would be more like an illuminated manuscript.
Yeah, but with no pictures.
Yeah.
I want to do it with language.
Okay.
I think it's possible to do it.
Tell me about a book that you read over and over again.
Well, it's poetry, really.
Okay.
I tend to go back to books of poems that to try and see whether it still does for me what it did first time round. Like I'm looking for a kind of electric shock, and interestingly, it keeps giving. Like I would read, so say one of my favourite novels, I would read, like I'd read Angel by Elizabeth Taylor again if I get time, or if it's just sitting by the bed, because I just see if I love Angel as much.
I do.
Or Ridley Walker. I read Ridley Walker a few times a year just to kind of like, oh God, it's still that good. But generally speaking, the novel sort of, when I'm reading it, I'm kind of meeting the 23-year-old me that read it then.
Right.
It's part of you, isn't it? Part of the fabric of you. So it's it's a sort of nostalgic exercise.
Yes.
And it's interesting to see how you've changed and it's changed and blah, blah, blah. But poetry, so say I would read an Emily Dickinson poem and find myself utterly rearranged by it again, as I was first time round, but in a completely different way. And it's only 9 lines. So,
well, again, the varying responses to the same words.
And like she's changed the world around me
right.
as much as I've allowed her to change me in the world. And that is, as someone that's interested on the effect of language on people.
Yes.
Like there's no one more interesting than her. If I had time, a friend of mine just read Shakespeare all the way through.
Oh wow.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Because I never did it properly. I was taught The Tempest, but I wasn't taught any other Shakespeare properly, and I'd like to go back and sort of...
But again, to have the time to do that, you need to kind of get TB or something, don't you?
know,
and have like 6 months in a
broken ankle.
sanatorium or a broken ankle.